Hello, and thank you for joining me for this conversation about grief. And when we're talking about grief, of course, there are many, many events in our world that can cause us to grieve. It can be the end of a marriage, a health reversal, financial reversal, even moving jobs or moving home. It's so many other things. Grief is about experiencing loss. And when we come together these conversations, we are not in any way denying all those other aspects of grief. We are, however, focusing the purposes of these conversations on the grief that comes with losing someone we care about, someone who has died. So today I am joined by two people I respect so very much. And we are going to be talking about how might someone know when their grief is beginning to heal? And I would like very much to welcome Dawn and Sandy. Thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, me too. This is great. I love getting together with you guys.
So do
Ditto.
I learned so much from all of you. So when we're talking about grief and what how someone might recognize healing, I'm wondering, and you can take any grief experience you've had, whether it's your most profound or something that was felt a little bit more gentle. Were you aware that healing was beginning when it was, or is it looking back that you're able to see it more clearly?
Um, for me, it's different depending on the person, depending on the time. So my major losses have been suicide losses. The first one was my sister. And we were teenagers. It was a long time ago. And that seemed to be a little more murky. When I lost my daughter in 2020, also to suicide, I I felt like I was maybe practiced. My peers, other moms that had lost their kids to suicide, they had a lot more confusion than I had because I had already gone through all the whys and understood I don't get to have those answers. And so there's certain parts of that brand of grief, that unique grief that comes along with the suicide loss, that I had already gone through. And so I kind of felt um, like I had already almost processed it right in the beginning. But I did feel like healing had started to take place when I could talk about her life without so much despair about her death.
That's interesting.
That makes a lot of sense. So what I'm hearing, and please clear me up if I've got any of this wrong, because we all know the caffeine wore off. What I'm hearing is it wasn't the absence of sadness or pain, it was moments of ease,
Well,
or
and
even slightly better.
the ability to experience a smile or a laugh without that immediate pang of guilt, and being able to look forward to things.
Okay, so almost like that little bit of sunshine that's coming through the crack in the blinds. That makes a lot of sense. How about you, Dawn?
And I feel like I am so different than everyone else about how I dealt with my husband's suicide. And I mean, I certainly got counseling with it, but I still feel like even through all that, I was just simply ignoring it. I was not dealing with it at all. And I didn't deal with it for years, I think, even though my father died 6 months later, and that was in many ways more traumatic to me, because I was there and I was so close to him. So it was when I was working with you, Sandy, as my grief coach, that was when true healing happened, and there was no doubt about it. And I think what what I could see differently is and I don't even, as I look at it now, I'm wondering at what point did I not see these events in my life and feel like I was there, like the flashback part, which is a
Ooh.
PTSD thing. And like, I mean, now as I'm talking about it, of course I see them still, but it's like I'm separate from it. I don't feel this emotional attachment to it. It's just simply something that happened. And so it's kind of interesting to me. How did that happen? And I know it happened because of you. There's no doubt about that, because of the coaching. All of the other things I didn't really help. And it seemed like things were getting worse and worse. So I think the reason what really helped was for me to actually feel those emotions, because I just simply did not do that for years. I just didn't do it. Didn't do it.
And maybe it wasn't time. It's really nice of you to give me the credit, and I appreciate that. But the truth is, you were the one who did the work. So let's always be really clear that somebody might get to be the facilitator, but the griever is the one who did the work. And I think about, there's somebody I care about very much, that we were very estranged when this person died. And it was what we would call a more natural death. It wasn't suicide or anything like that. It was from other issues. And healing for me happened, or began, when I decided it was time to forgive both of us, for his part, for my part, for both doing the best we could. We're very much alike, which really ticked me off to realize at the deepest levels. And to go into that hard work of, you did the best you could, I did the best I could. And I tell anybody who will listen that our relationship is much better now than it was when he was walking the planet. It's not that we didn't care about each other, but healing happened for me. Very much what you said, Dawn. I had to go into those emotions, those hard places. I just flat out didn't want to go. With my son, I didn't feel like I had a choice. I was dropped into that soup. Like it or not, I was going to feel those emotions. And that's different for everybody too. And it's not necessarily because, yes, we've been talking about the traumatic, complicated grief that we can have when we lose someone to suicide. And Sandy, it's heartbreaking it is that you've had 3 experiences with that. And Dawn and I have each had one, and I've had other relatives and people I know. But every grief experience looks, sounds, feels a little different, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Very, yes.
And when Dawn said we had to go through those emotions, and I don't know. Let's be real clear about that. Don't know. But not everybody's ready to go through those emotions right away, are they?
Evidently.
So we figured out.
I think that we have some protective mechanisms built in that kind of maybe slow us down in the beginning from facing certain things. Because there's certain things that we have to just kind of stay on autopilot for in the very beginning.
And as I look back too on each of these deaths in my life, and I didn't really have any kind of like family or friends that were close by. I mean, my parents were both alive when my husband took his life, but they didn't like him at all. And we just didn't have, they didn't. And so I didn't have any kind of, loving support about that, really. It was more a relief, just a relief that he was gone, and that, I didn't have to worry about that. And then my mom, I mean, she and I didn't have a great relationship. So when my dad died, I didn't really have anyone to like turn to, anybody close, physically close, that I could, confide in. And it's kind of interesting. I don't know. I mean, yeah, do other people have that? Did y'all have that? Because I realized I didn't. I was kind of alone, went through all of that.
I kind of feel like that too. With my husband was my best friend, my confidant, my rock. And he came into my life. It was like 2 years after my sister died. And my mom absolutely loved him, like handpicked him. But yeah, when he passed, I mean, I had my grief group through Sandy. And I had like the immediate people that surround you in the beginning. And then it was literally the day of his memorial. I came home to an empty house and nobody was here.
Yeah.
And yeah, people move on with their lives and people assume that somebody else is around you, or oh, they all think about you all the time. So but yeah, their lives go on and there's nobody to talk to about it, you know. I had one of the gals that was in my group had also lost her husband when she was young. So we kind of bonded and she'd come and see me a lot, but yeah, in the immediate vicinity there wasn't.
You know,
So
and
it's
what's so funny, I'm sorry, but what's so funny about this is my kids and my sister, I think both said, because I moved to Colorado from my home state, Florida, but my parents had already moved to Colorado. And but I didn't know anybody else. And then my husband was with me. So then I ended up moving back to Florida, where, I mean, by the time I went back there, there weren't too many people around left. But then I moved to North Carolina, where I absolutely know nobody. Okay, I don't know anybody here. And I've been here for, I don't know, a couple of years. I don't honestly know how long, 2-3 years, I don't know. And I heard both of my children and my sister say, well, they were worried about me being here. And I thought, I can't see that this is any more lonely than any other place I've ever been. Because I don't think they realize that if you don't have anybody who lives with you or lives next door that you're really close to, it's no different. It's really no different, I don't think, than being in some place where you don't know anyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're interesting things, aren't they? Because when I think about this, so often when I have conversations with people, I imagine they think, well, you're either in pain or you're okay.
Right. What is that?
Exactly. And isn't it interesting? Because, I like to make things if I use a physical example, it's easier for me to make sense. So I think about hubby had both knees replaced last spring. This surgery was on one day. Well, healing has been happening, hasn't it? Yesterday we were out walking 6 miles. He did great. No problem. No issue. A little sore, a little tight, the little Tylenol, and that's okay. That's still healing, isn't it? But he's certainly not in the intense pain that he was 2 days after the surgery when all the drugs wore off.
Yeah.
So why is it that we might imagine our emotions are either one or the other? We talk so often, we have these conversations about that spectrum. And so it was probably really hard for him to imagine himself as healing as he was hobbling around the house. But I could see a change. And I wonder if maybe it's easier for you to identify those bits of healing in somebody that you're talking to, or somebody that you love, or someone you care about. Or maybe it's easier to see it in yourself when you look in the rearview mirror.
I think that's at the rearview mirror thing. And yeah, when you're looking from the outside in at somebody else's situation. Yeah. I think both of those, because, yeah, I can't usually recognize my own healing unless I look back on my journals. Or like I said, I think about, I'm better off today than I was a year ago. I know that much. But am I healed? No, I'm healing. And I do think that it's a long process.
But you just said two things that I'm going to interrupt you about because I both think they both matter. And if you wouldn't mind, I'd like you to unpack them and expand on them a little bit more. You talked about journaling, and if you look back, you can see the difference from where you are now. Can you say more about that?
So I think, if I'm having a particularly hard day and I'm thinking, this is just never going to get better. I'm going to be alone forever. I miss my husband. I don't want anybody else. I just want him back. I want my family back. I could be in a house full of people and feel completely alone because I want my people, Um, and then I look at, okay, well, what did I do yesterday? What do I have planned for tomorrow? If I look at my journal from a year ago, I would get out of bed to let the dogs out and I would work and then I'd go right back to bed. And I journaled, panicked about, worried about somebody, just absolutely desperate to have my people back, and of course I would love to have my people back, but it's not this like hyper focus, can't get away from it, so it's I just think that journaling is a really good tool. It does help. It helps get it all out. And it also helps to mark your progress so that when you feel I'm never going to get better, you can look back and go, oh, but I am better, maybe not all the way there, but I'm better than I was.
That's huge, isn't it? That reflection.
Yeah. And I think, and some journaling too, I think that it's really important for people to not have any rules. There doesn't have to be grammar. There doesn't have to be sentence and paragraph structure. It can be scribbles. It can be drawings. It doesn't have to be this perfectly eloquent, professional looking writing. It can be just a bunch of jumbled stuff. Yeah. But that's going to help you look back at it and say, oh, look at where I was at.
That's so interesting to me. I have journaled, gosh, I don't even know how many years. Not that I've always done it every day, but I have done it for a very long time. And I can honestly say I have never looked back, ever. I have never looked at one of them, ever. It's like, and so for me, I see the journaling as just a way of getting things out that need to be out. But it wasn't enough by itself for me, but it did definitely help me. And I keep them all. I do keep them because you can't throw that stuff away. But I can't, and actually I can remember reading that there was no point in keeping them because I started journaling because of The Artist's Way. That was what started me.
Yeah.
And that is really about just writing and not caring why you're writing. But I knew that like after my husband took his life, I wrote very specific stuff, exactly what happened. And because I didn't want to forget it. And I also felt like at some point I would want to write about it. And I like for things to be accurate, at least from my point of view. And anyway, so and that I know I have it, but I would have to hunt for it. And I think though, after you have said this, Sandy, I think I will go back and look at some stuff because I just never have. And it might be interesting to do that. I gauge my healing in a different way. And that has to be like either when I actually just thinking about the circumstances of people dying was enough to get us, I would just completely fall apart and not be able to, I wouldn't be able to talk about it or even think about it. And so now I can do that. And so that is huge. It doesn't mean that I don't sometimes get emotional, because sometimes I do, but not usually when I'm talking to other people like this. It happens more when I'm just thinking about it by myself. And I just, I let it boy, I let it go out as hard as it wants to, because I knew that that was something that I had difficulty with. So that I don't ever stop. And I can't stop it anyway. I mean, if I'm out in public and I'm talking to somebody and I start crying, I'm just like, I don't know if it's because I'm older or what, because after a while, it's like some things you're like, well, I just can't do that anymore.
Not interested. I've moved on.
That must be it. I just don't have any willpower interest in doing that. So it doesn't bother me anymore. And, but I hardly ever do it. So that's nice.
It's
Well, I
kind
think
of
the only time I've really felt the need to look back on my journals is when I'm feeling stuck. And then I'll like try to prove it to myself. So I'll look at my journals and be like, see.
oh, that's
but I'm usually
good.
not stuck. It's just and then the only time I've ever you mentioned getting rid of them, I had like a little burning ceremony with some journals, and this was many, many years ago. My husband and I are both in recovery from addiction, and I was having a really hard time letting go of some anger and resentment at him. So I went through and read some old journals, and sure enough, there was a lot of anger in there. And so I just had to let it go. He was a totally different person in sobriety. I had to let that stuff go. So I burned it in the fire pit. There was probably 10 journals.
And that can be healing too, right?
Well, and yeah, I mean, it was our old life. It just wasn't pertaining to anything now. And I had to somehow just make it all stop in my head. It's like I couldn't let go of it. So it was
Sometimes,
helpful.
oh my gosh, yes. There's someone I know who's been journaling forever, and every now and then goes back and burns certain journals, says, I don't want somebody else to read this. It served its purpose.
Mhm.
Others, that person will publish and share. So I think it's very interesting.
Mhm.
And when I think about this notion of healing, I think about when I was in those hardest places of grief with different people. That place looks and feels and sounds different. For me, as I reflect, I don't believe I had awareness that I was feeling better in the moment.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I think it's so valuable to be connected with someone, whether it's somebody who knew you before this grief experience, or maybe someone in a support group or something different, because it's almost like they could hold up a mirror and reflect this at us a little bit better. And when I look back, part of those experiences that I can now recognize as healing was when my focus was not entirely 24/7 that loss.
Yeah.
Yep,
Maybe
that's a
somebody
good
else
marker
mattered.
too. Yeah, I can relate to that.
And I also do not believe that I could discern any healing at the time it was happening.
Mhm.
I don't think that was, no. I mean, I could see change maybe, or for instance, I could say, oh, I know I'm doing something. And but I couldn't really see that it had changed. And I can't even tell you what the time frame was on how long did all that take. I think it was really incremental over a good year and a half of specifically working on that type of thing, because there are other things to work on too. So
Well, and that's fair, Dawn. I think that's a really good point, because no matter how overwhelming your grief is, I bet every one of you at some point needed to make a meal.
Yeah.
And you had to give that your attention, or take
Mhm.
care of a pet, or there was something else that needed your attention. So it wasn't like we could spend all of our time working through, even though at the time it felt like that's what we did 24/7.
Mhm.
This probably a part of us was. When I think about what might have been some markers I was feeling better, maybe it would be when I could get to the office and actually hold an appointment with a client and not fall apart right away afterwards, or ahead, or both.
Yeah.
And that's different for everybody too, isn't it? So if you're talking to somebody who is going through a grief experience, and again, that loss could be from anything. It could have been that their person took their last breath in their sleep and it was expected and God bless them, but they miss them so much that they're grieving terribly. Or it could be something tragic. What might you help them to notice or be on the lookout for? And would it be okay to call that healing, or would different language feel better? Would it be you're shifting or feeling a little bit better or reaching for ease?
Yeah, or different. You feel different today than you did last week. Yeah. Yeah. So calling attention to, you know, oh, I see that you're able to do this today. And I haven't seen you do that since before. You feeling it, you feeling it at all? Or, just, but sometimes, yeah, when I was in that, I kind of didn't want to feel better,
Is
so
that
it's
okay
kind of
with
hard,
you?
right? It's kind of hard to come up with, pointing it out to somebody who is just in it, and that's just where they want to stay for a little bit longer. They don't want to let it go. And I don't know if that's everybody, if it's just when you lose a kid, I don't know. Or like a lot of women that lose their husbands to suicide, they're so angry. And I never had that anger toward my husband. So I didn't want to feel better, you know?
So what I'm wondering if maybe some of it is, I'm noticing a shift.
Yeah. Words like shift, or do you feel a little bit different about this? Or yeah.
Because
But
none of
maybe to
us
use the
want,
word healing might be like, oh, I am
it could be
not.
too much. It can be too much, especially when
Right.
you're still feeling like junk, right?
Right.
Yeah.
No, I'm not healed. Are you kidding? I showered 3 months ago. That's good for now. So maybe it's I see a shift, or if I'm talking to someone, what might I ask them to be on the lookout for? And even asking that question, is it okay, Sandy? Is it okay, Dawn, if you feel a little bit better?
Well, and this actually came up this past year. I was with a person who went through a very traumatic loss, and we had a really good night where we were hanging out with some other people, and there was a lot of laughter. And this person's kind of old personality came out, and I did ask, did you feel guilty about having a good time? And they said no. And I said, is that the first time since this loss? And they said yes. And I'm like, so now that you know that it's possible to feel joy and to have fun, not immediately followed that by that pang of guilt, because I'd been saying all along, it is possible. Someday you're going to feel better. It happens slow. Now, do you believe me that it's possible? Because it's been a very, very long, hard road, man. And so it's so yeah, and this person was able to receive that. It landed okay, thank goodness, because it's always a little bit nerve-wracking, because I don't want to cause more pain. Gosh, but so yeah, and it was, probably a good 9 months after the fact. And that was the first time that this person was able to have a good time and not feel terrible about it.
That's worth honoring, isn't it? And maybe just having a very quiet party in your mind that they don't see, because that could be too much.
Well, I did say it's a big deal. It's kind of like a hurdle. And there will be more, I promise, But yeah, because I didn't want to push too hard, because I know what it feels like to be, no, I don't even want to feel better,
So it's another situation, and I feel like this is a part of every conversation, that the language we have, as expansive as the English language is, I feel like we need to make our own dictionary. Because do I feel like we're healing? Yes, but I feel like there needs to be more nuance,
Yeah.
and other words or other phrases to sort of ease into that
Mhm.
for different people. I don't know, Dawn, what do you think?
Well, that brings to mind whenever you ask if you had a win this past week. And to me, I think most people think of that being kind of a big thing. And to me, it should be really small. I mean, it could be really small. Like, oh, I had a really good memory. That's a win. I had a really
Beautiful.
pleasant memory. Wow, that was, you know, I have every time when I see a certain type of bird, like a woodpecker, I think it's, Pablo, my suicide husband, and it makes me smile. It makes me smile because I'm like, oh, and I always say, I haven't forgotten it. I never will. I will never forget you. You know, thanks for reminding me that you were a good guy, and it was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun. So,
And that's a big win to remember that.
oh yeah, absolutely. I don't even have to remember the fun times. It's just kind of knowing that we did. You know, it was actually he was a real fun guy. And yeah, but I think there are some things in nature that to me really kind of remind me of a loved one. And they're little things. My dad, whenever he had heart issues, and he really was sitting in the chair in the living room, and this was in Colorado where you have the big skies, and so he would see the contrails, and he would always say something about a contrail. And so every time I see a contrail, it reminds me of him, and it's a positive thing. It's like, oh yeah, dad, you know and especially since it's up there.
I love that. I love that. So if we're talking to people who are fresh in their grief,
Yeah.
I usually like to ask them, is it okay to imagine feeling better? Even a little bit. And if it's not, is it okay if I ask later? Is it okay if I ask another time? Since people, we often talk about baby steps, don't we? Well, the three of us have each had children and watched them grow. And I think about those baby steps. My steps right now are a lot easier than those first steps were. When we take those first steps, obviously I don't remember my own, but I'm willing to bet my mother would tell you that I landed on my nose a lot. My boys did, because they were always protecting the cars in their hands. They always landed on their face when they were taking their baby steps. But those baby steps are the one when you're finding your balance, you're learning how to get up. They are the most momentous, aren't they? And so when I talk to grievers about those baby steps, let's honor them for the importance they have. And it doesn't mean for one moment that you're letting go of your person. I like to think about it as you're bringing them back more fully. So I wonder what it might be like to imagine that slight bit of ease and feeling the person or people. I mean, this sounds silly, but right now it's almost like I could imagine the last boxer I lived with here in this room, and he's right over there somehow snorting, making Chewbacca noises, because that's what he did. Is it okay to bring that back, just as you just did, Dawn, as you're talking about your dad?
Yeah, it's like that to me is such a concrete way of feeling and knowing that it's getting better, you know. And I know for me to imagine, I'm such a concrete person. It's like um, I think to be asked, well, when did you enjoy your father's, your loved one's laugh the most? What was the event? You know, something like that. That was so, what was that? Do you remember that? What happened? You know, um, to me, that's kind of a way to realize that there's hope. If you can actually think about something like that.
Yeah, and then follow it up with, once they answer that question, follow it up with, now did that feel a little better?
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's once again, not being stuck with one word, is it?
Mhm.
Because healing, for me, that was of great importance, but for someone else, it might feel, I think you said the word earlier, Sandy, that was a betrayal or leave. Some people worry that that's leaving their loved one behind if they move forward. And so let's find the language. It's okay for someone else. Is it okay to feel a bit lighter? Is it okay to breathe easier?
Well, I remember when I was in sessions with you as my coach, um, and I don't know if we brought it up yet on this particular chat, but the idea of giving yourself permission, that was something that I kind of had to mull over, and it made sense to me. And then I couldn't do it right away. I had to sit and mull it and mull it, because yes, I did need permission. And I think at one point you even said, I give you permission.
Some of us are pushy like that. That might have been offered to send it to you on a paper.
Right. Well, and then I had to be able to give myself permission. And it was helpful to hear that from you, because, and this is when it was before my husband died, but after my child. And I kept thinking about when my mom lost my sister, and my mom was going downhill big time, late stage Alzheimer's. And so she couldn't really be there to support me. She wasn't herself anymore. And she never gave herself permission. And you had lost your son so many years before, and you had given yourself that permission. And the stark contrast between the way my mom lived her life after my sister and the way you live your life after your son. I mean, it's just night and day. So I thought, okay, well, I know that I learned from my mom that I don't want to do it that way. I need to do this better for my son. And so I thought, okay, well, I've got this mentor that's going to show me this path. So I think that giving yourself permission is kind of a big deal. For me, it was anyway.
And don't you almost, as you're saying that, I almost imagine that we could ask our loved one on the other side, how do you feel about me maybe feeling a little bit better today?
Yeah.
Now, I probably wouldn't ask my son permission, because he'd say, no, not a boo-boo. I would probably tell him I'm giving myself permission. Hope you're good with that. But wouldn't it be interesting to imagine I give myself permission to smile today?
Mm.
I give myself permission to hum along with my favorite song.
Mm-hmm.
I give myself permission to enjoy a hot shower.
Mm-hmm.
I give myself permission, ...
To do
What
a
might that
thing,
look?
not feel all better and be healed. Right.
Yeah.
Because it's little baby steps. Yeah. I like that. And then how does that feel? To
How
feel
does that feel?
better after my hot shower,
Is that okay?
Is it okay to feel better? Yeah.
And if it's not, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Why
Well,
not?
and then again, it's gonna kind of depend on the relationship too, going back to, asking your person, hey, can I feel better? Like I said, the wives of men that have died from suicide, a lot of them have a lot of anger, and they're like, he doesn't get to have a say. He did this to me. You know? And I don't have that anger. So I'm like, I'm going to make him proud. I'm going to, I'm going to get through this. And so it's going to depend on the relationship and the loss.
And maybe that's something that someone can use sort of to propel them forward.
Mhm.
I don't need your permission.
Right.
I'm doing this and I'll show up different.
Yeah.
And is that okay? It's going to be different for
You
everybody.
can't keep me held down. Yeah. Yeah. You can use it. Yeah.
You know, we often hear someone say, well, I need to live for the one who's died, no matter how they've died. And I honor and respect that if that's where you are at the moment.
Mhm.
And one of the things I like to ask someone is, today, did you live completely and entirely for that person? Or did you also live partly for you? Or partly for maybe your partner, or your child, your parent, your friend, your neighbor, your dog?
Mhm.
Was there a piece that was also for someone else? Because I see that as another step in healing.
Mhm. And is it okay if that changes next week or next month, or,
Yeah. Is it okay?
and I think that too early on, I don't think that I could answer any of these questions. I would have just shut you right down. So it's kind of like, at a certain point when they're ready to hear things and consider things.
And I think that what you said is exactly right, Sandy. So that's why I wonder, when we talk to someone, whether it's a friend, if it's a client, no matter who it is, when we talk about how did you know you were healing, we can say, this is what I've noticed, or this is what I've experienced or observed. And I wonder when you'll look back and notice that too.
Mhm.
It seems to me, as I talk to you, Sandy, and as I talk to you, Dawn, that with each of us, it's been looking back that we're much more able to have a clear idea. That's when something was happening.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Though, what was it? Okay, so when we were talking about journaling, and I can't remember if we did this as one of our topics or kind of thrown into the journal prompts. I'm trying to remember where I learned this, but in addition to, you're journaling about what had happened in the past week or in the past day and how you're feeling about it, da 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 da, what I want to happen.
The futuring.
Right. Because I think that can be helpful with people healing too.
Mhm.
It just gives them proof that they want to heal. What do I want to have happen here? Barring getting the person back, because we know that that's not possible. But, what do I want to have happen as I move forward? Because that's just their own proof in their own words that they do want to heal. That's intention.
And intention matters, doesn't it? That's a huge
It's
piece.
like, that's a big, giant piece.
I agree. I could talk to the two of you about this and so many other things for hours, of course. But we will wrap this up because I know you have lives, and I would imagine the people listening do too, but we will be talking about more at other times. I want to thank you both for joining me tonight, because this has been so interesting. And all of your information that you would like to share will, of course, be below. But before we wrap up, I'd like to give you each the opportunity to say who you are so that people know a little bit more about you. Dawn, could we start with you?
Sure. I'm a writer, and I have a website. It's dawnlaurenanderson.com. And you can read a lot of my old blogs. And I actually have a couple of published personal essays. And I'm also a master grief coach. And so you can contact me on that website. And I invite you to definitely sign up for my blog, which is also on the website.
It's an excellent blog. I highly recommend others do subscribe to it, because it's well worth the read. Thank you for joining me, Dawn. Sandy, I'm so glad you were here as well. Would you like to tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, I'm Sandy, and I'm a master grief coach, and I really enjoyed our chat today. Look forward to more.
And I'm so glad you were here. And I thank all of you for listening. I'm Sandy Walden. I am a Master Grief Coach. I also offer Master Grief Coach certification as well as a grief healing course. And you can find me at sandywalden.com. Obviously, I have a YouTube channel and a website, and I'm on Facebook. I'm around. So please continue to join us for these conversations. Subscribe and share because they're insightful, they're helpful. And I think it's good for all of us to understand that none of these experiences that we have with grief and healing are written in stone. That there's places to move, places to change, places to explore. I'm so grateful to have been joined by these amazing women tonight. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you.
Namaste.